Welcome back to Becoming a Published Author is Fun. If that doesn't make any sense to you, check out episode 8 where I explain it. Today we have reached a new benchmark, if you will, episode 40, and we are discussing on point. Well, you might say, what's that about, on point? Well, I have a meaning here. I looked it up to make sure. A couple words that apply. Is it relevant? Is it appropriate? And we're relating this to your message. So this is what we're going to be looking at today, is getting your message out there and making sure that the story you're writing, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, is on point. So, is your writing on point? And that is a good question to ask yourself. I mean, it's one thing to sit down and just write a story, but every story has some kind of a message. Whether it's you actually thought it out and have one in mind, or it just plays out. And it can, if it does the latter, it can send the wrong message. So what is the message of your story? It doesn't have to be profound. It doesn't have to be spiritual. But you need to know what your message is. The theme, think of it like a theme. Or the plot itself. The message is incorporated in your plot. And we'll get to that. But you need to figure out what your message is. Most of my messages are Bible-based stories. So part of my message is to encourage people to go to the Bible and to find out what God has to say about different people. There are people throughout the Bible, they were not perfect. They made mistakes, and God records them. It's one of the reasons we know it's an indicative of it being God's Word. He tells the truth, even if that truth doesn't look good on the person that he's talking about. David, a man after God's own heart. Some of the things he did were not godly actions. God told about it. And he also told about how God, reacted to that. But that's the thing is, now in my case, I'm talking about a Bible story. But you might not even be talking about a Bible story. It may be some person, maybe about yourself, maybe about an event that you, in history, one that you did involve yourself in or attend or whatever, or one that took place long before you ever lived. It could be that kind of a historical thing. But the idea is, what is the message that you're sending, either intentional or unintentional? And so that's a good thing to try to examine. Here's a question: is your story on point? Is your story on point? And that means, okay, let's put this meaning up here. Your story relevant to the message? Is your story appropriate to the message? There's different ways of asking the same question. It all comes down to, you have a message. Again, I'm going to probably might say this several times throughout this post, whether it's intentional or unintentional. What is the message? And is your story relevant or appropriate to that message? And only you can really know, because you know what your message is. You may only be writing with the idea of entertaining people, but your story is going to send another message that might influence people. So let's say you write a story about somebody, might be your heroine or hero, and they do something that is really wrong, and they get away with it. Well, what kind of message does that send to your reader? It's going to be a bad message, unless there's some kind of punishment or else, down the road that can be related back to that. It can be a simple thing of a child disobeying a parent. It's going to have consequences one way or another. They may be immediate. They may be well down the road into adulthood. A lot of the problems we see in the world today are because kids, when they did things that were wrong, their parents didn't discipline them for it, and then they grew up thinking that they could do certain things, and they had disrespect for not only their parents, but maybe in disrespect for law, for any kind of government or anything like that. It's a complicated world we live in. And one little false step that's not corrected at an early age can be magnified. And I'm not saying it always happens that way, but I'm saying it could. And that's the thing, is that your story can send the wrong message. So you've got to be on guard about that. What kind of message are you sending to your readers? You don't know who those readers are. That reader may be prone to a certain way of thinking. And if you send the wrong message, it could trigger that wrong kind of thinking. On the other hand, you may have somebody out there who, well, like in my books, I try to point out to my message is usually about the Bible, about God. I want people to turn to the Bible. I want people to see God in a very positive light. That would be my message. So if I'm in there and God does something that is on the surface looks wrong, and I don't do in my story a way of bringing out the fact that it is correct and why it's correct, then the person could get a wrong image of God, which is completely opposite of the message I'm trying to send. So the thing is, I have to keep on point. So, well, how do you do that? How do you remain on point? First of all, you got to get on point. I don't have that up here because I'm assuming that you start out your story with that maybe in your mind of what it is. And that brings us up to two things here. What is your message? Know what message you want. It may be very general, and you may not require a lot of thinking on your part, at least at the beginning. But like I said, mine is I want people to see the Bible in a positive light. I want to see them to see God in a positive light. And so that's very simple. And it might get more complicated as the story goes on, depending upon the story itself. Which brings us to the plot. Your plot should include your message. Now, please don't get to the point that I got to figure out every last detail of the message. No. You have a general concept of your story. Your message is probably in dwelling that concept. Your concept will maybe like you say, I'm going to write a book about such and such. Again, using myself as an example, my very first, well, every book that I've written that is Bible based was, I'm going to write a book about such and such. Maybe it was Jacob. How about Joseph? I wanted people to see and understand something about Joseph, so that when they're reading the Bible, they can both have a historical perspective on him, that he was an actual person who lived, and there's many who believe that who he actually was in Egyptian history. And others might disagree with that, but it gives a historical viewpoint. It also gives you see, although Christ is never mentioned in the story, you begin to understand certain things about him, and your mind might actually, if you know anything about Christ, your mind might actually go to Christ, that he's actually a type of Christ in the Old Testament. Now, I don't bring that out in the book per se, but you might be lean towards that as you read the story. And if it gets you into the Bible, then you got to see this, and you go to the New Testament, and you will see references to Joseph. And so the thing is this: you have a message. Now, my message that I started out with was just the Bible and God Himself, Jesus Christ. But as it got down into a particular book and everything, then it took on a life of its own, and that message grew. And with it, the plot grew too. So your plot always should reflect what your message is to that point. And so that brings us to the next part here. Summarize it. Now you could actually reverse this and say, these two here, summarize it and then put it in the plot. But a lot of times the plot is very small at the beginning anyhow. But what I'm talking about is as you go through it and as it starts to grow, this is something you'll do frequently, and it's going to affect your plot. That's why I say you could reverse it. But you want to summarize it in as few words as possible so that you understand it. Doesn't even have to appear in the book itself. It's simply something for you to know so that you have an idea of where you're going. I've talked before about how characters can take over a story. That can be good, that can be bad. You want them to be, the characters themselves to be on point. And if you have the plot and you've summarized it to some degree, then you'll be able to make sure, oh, wait a minute, that character is going way out of the plot that I have here. Well, then you have to make a choice. Do you change the plot? Or do you change the character's traits and leanings that are leading him or her astray? So you have to be, again, on point. You got to be, think of it in that sense. Now, this is not a conscious thing that you're going to be always doing. It is going to be something that it's going to come naturally. The more you do it, you may not even think about it. You start out, and when you first start out doing anything, you think about every action. When you get a job, for instance, a brand new job that you've never done before, it may involve certain things you know, but in that particular job you've never done before, and things are new to you. The language is new to you. If it involves you going to different places within a building, that's new to you. Different chores or tasks may be new to you, and the whole thing may be new. And at first you have to almost think your way through each task. Now, some people are faster than others. I was faster at an earlier age than I am now. I slow down a little bit. So the thing is that you want to think it through, analyze it a little bit, and then keep repeating, keep doing. And you're going to discover that after a while, you're no longer thinking about it. You're just doing. You don't have to think about this. You don't have to think about that. You know how to do it. And you automatically do it. So that's something that this whole thing here will become automatic to you. And you may not even think about how you're doing it. You're just doing it. And then you need to communicate. Are you communicating to your reader, your message? Without use of a sledgehammer, by the way. But you're communicating it to it through the actions, through the speech, through every aspect of the story. Are you communicating the message in an appropriate and reliable way, a relevant way rather, reliable also for that matter, but relevant, appropriate way? Are you communicating it to them? And if you're doing that, then you are being a success as a writer. There are a lot of points of success that you want to look at as a writer. Some people, they only think of dollars and cents. Well, that's a wrong way to look at writing. You can come out with some pretty bad trash if that's your only concept of having a relevant message, of having a successful story. You want to be able to communicate your message throughout, whatever that message happens to be. You want to entertain, that's part of your message really, because it's the vehicle in which you're carrying your message. And so you want to do and stay on point, remain on point throughout your book. That's what editing is all about. You want to go through and not just correct grammar or correct spelling. Just about anybody can do that. But you want to go through it and see, does it relate to the message, to the plot? In many ways, and I've already covered this to some extent, but the plot covers your message. And so you can actually interchange them because it's in the message, in the plot. Then you always are using that plot as your outline, as your guide to writing that story from start to finish. So as the reader, when they get all done, they come to the conclusions you want them to come to. Now, some people say, I only write to entertain. Well, you're still going to be passing some kind of a message on. So the best thing is find out your message, memorize it, get on it, get on point, stay on point, summarize it if you can. Don't want to be too complicated for you to understand anyhow. And so do all these things that I'm talking about, and I believe that you are going to have a stronger story than what you might have had otherwise. That is today's episode, and I will see you in the next episode.